Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. Today, I thought I would take part in a book tag, a tag that I was tagged in by the wonderful and generous Pat at Book Chat with Pat. The tag is called 5 Poets I Think You Should Know, even if you don't want to. And I think I struggle a little bit with that title. There's sort of a type of grudging respect for poetry in that title. It may be implied. So I have renamed my video 5 Poets to Luxuriate in, and then in brackets, slowly. So these are 5 poets that I love and that I think, well, at least I would love to share with you my love of these particular poets. I don't read poetry indiscriminately. I don't love everything. I don't tend to respond very well to poetry, particularly modernist or some contemporary poetry, that is self-consciously obscure and experimental. I often find that type of poetry, for me at least, it doesn't engage me at all, and I often find it a little bit ungenerous, a little bit self-indulgent. I don't mind it being out there in the world, but it's not my cup of tea. I am drawn to a very different type of poetry, and that's what I might share with you today. For me, it is absolutely impossible to share a list of 5 favourite poets. I don't have any such list. For me, my favourite poets are really whatever I'm reading at the present time. So I thought what I might do in this video is share with you what I am now reading and what, for me, right now, are my 5 favourite poets. Because Britain has been a little bit in the news lately, and Britain's going through some really hard social, cultural times, political times, economic times, the last few months, I suppose, I've really returned to many of those United Kingdom voices and that tension that there is in the media at the moment around contemporary Britain, despite the joyful election of the new Labour government. There are a lot of problems, and those problems, those juxtapositions, tensions have really drawn me back to that United Kingdom voice. So all 5 poets that I'm going to share with you today are contemporary United Kingdom poets, mainly English and Welsh. The first poet that I thought I might share with you is a wonderful English poet called Jo Shapcott. Jo Shapcott is a wonderful voice that's really attuned to the natural world. She's a great poet of place. She writes wonderful poetry in praise of place, for example. It's a poetry that I'm really drawn to. She's also done a lot of work, not so much translating Rilke, but reimagining the poetic voice of Rilke into the English language. So she's a wonderful poet of those sorts of things as well. The first poem that I thought I might read to you today is from this particular book called Her Book Poems. And this is sort of like a selected poems from the early part of Jo Shapcott's career. This first poem, completely different to anything I just described in terms of the poetry reimagining the voice of Rilke, those wonderful poems in praise of place. This is a very different sort of poem. It could even be a love poem, a quite erotically charged love poem. But there are other ways of reading this poem as well. It's a poem called Matter. He touched my skin all afternoon, as though he could feel the smallest particles which make me up. By tea time, he knew each of the billions of electrons which fly through my body every second. Then I think he was searching for the particles not yet discovered, but believed to exist. Then I didn't know what time it was anymore, and neither of us knew which was inside or outside, as he reached somewhere very deep and fingered gold. Charms, strangers, tops and gravitons, but not the words he wanted, which only come now. Oh, I just love the way Joe Shapcott can finish a poem. Such an understated sense of joy. Here's another poem. Joe Shapcott also is quite interested in classical allusions, retelling classical stories. Here's a poem she's written called Watching Medusa. Struck dumb when I saw her scalp begin to stir, saw the little eyes slide like drops through her hair, saw them look back at me kindly and fluid as a bunch of lovers. I cannot speak or move in case I do wrong to her, and close the sweet hissing mouths. Watching Medusa. So that's this poem, her book poems, are sort of, as I said, are selected from the first 10 years, I guess, of her career. Here's a more recent book by Joe Shapcott of Mutability. The first poem that I thought I might read to you is the title poem. It's the first poem in the collection of Mutability. Too many of the best cells in my body are itching, feeling jagged, turning raw in this spring chill. It's 2004 and I don't know a soul who doesn't feel small among the numbers, razor small. Look down these days to see your feet, mistrust the pavement and your blood tests turn the doctor's expression grave. Look up to catch eclipses, gold leaf, comets, angel chandeliers out of the corner of your eye. Join them if you like. Learn astrophysics or learn folk song, human sacrifice, mortality, flying, fishing, sex without touching much. Don't trouble though to head anywhere but the sky. Oh, what a beautiful poem of, I guess, fragility, isn't it? Living in this world without the surenesses, without the certainties that we often had maybe in the past. It can be quite difficult, can't it? Here's a wonderful comic poem. With my bald head, I just couldn't help but share this one. This is a little bit self-indulgent, comically so on my part. This is a beautiful poem Joe Shapcott has called Hairless. Can the bald lie? The nature of the skin says not. It's newborn, pale, erection, tender stuff. Every thought visible, pure knowledge, mind in action, shining through the skull. I saw a woman, hairless, absolute, cleaning. She mopped the green floor, dusted bookshelves, all cloth and concentration. Queen of the moon. You can tell with the bald that the air speaks to them differently, touches their heads with exquisite expression. As she danced her laundry dance with the motes, everything she ever knew skittered under her scalp. It was clear just from the texture of her head. She was about to raise her arms to the sky. I covered my ears as she prepared to sing, to roar. Oh, what a dramatic, wonderful poem. Oh, Joe Shapcott. Here's a pair of poems that I just, again, couldn't resist. This is going back to Joe Shapcott's interest in classical allusions and the retelling of classical stories, I guess. During World War II, when the Luftwaffe were bombing London, a ancient Roman temple was exposed under one of the ruins of one of these bomb sites. And it was a temple that we think was originally dedicated to the Persian god Mithras, but was rededicated sometime in the 3rd or 4th century to the crowd favourite Bacchus. So these are two poems that Joe Shapcott has written in response to the discovery of this wonderful temple, this now very important archaeological site right in the heart of London. The first poem is called Religion for Girls. Just now, we need as many as we can get. Myself, I'd like an underground goddess to supervise the tube, to watch the drains. A god for airlines, one for dodgy builders, and one for children's breath. But we've got this, a temple filled with marble body parts, the giant hand with which Mithras killed the bull, Minerva's head, her helmet lost, her wisdom leaking out. A tiny Mercury, too small to dash between earth and paradise, stuck chatting here. A local London genius for this and that, an elderly god for the Thames, lying down, a mother goddess. Unnervingly powerful, plump, a god from Egypt for the underworld. Bacchus for giving sparky life, and all of those gods with bits of gods left here to chew over the wandering mortals of London as we chant our evening standards to ourselves in our stalled commuter trains, curse under breath at traffic jams, high-rises, shopping centres, and go out about our business following the invisible sun from east to west. Oh, such a wonderfully comic sense of drama, but also evoking all of those layers of meaning, those archaeological time spans. Wonderful poem. Here's the, I suppose, the parallel poem on the next page. This one, of course, is called Religion for Boys. Thursday night in the Temple of Mithras is busy. Deals to do, rituals to keep, favours to return. But all the lads take time to nod to the goddess as they go. The little stone figure in the porch who overflows on her plinth. No females been through that church door. Not even her. More ancients than the altar carved like a movie where a sacred bull had an ear of corn sprouting from his tail, and a raven, dog, snake, scorpion surround the young god under the sun, under the moon. She's older than resurrection, and she's seen it all before. The men muttering and striving before the sacrifice, eyeing each other's rank. She chuckles. These boys do such hard graft, big tests where they've sat hard against the fire, torturing themselves through 7 grades towards perfection. The costumes and the drinking, whether beer, wine or cockerel blood, it starts them chanting, Father, Father, Father. The word sliding out of the temple, through the porch, into the goddess's granite fists, until she lets it fly to the sun and to the moon. Oh, Joe Shapcott, beautiful book of Mutability. I also have this terrific book by Joe Shapcott, Tender Texas, which is another more contemporary collection from her. It's about 10 years old now, I think. I won't read from this one today, but Joe Shapcott, a wonderful poet. While we're with that temple that was discovered in London, the temple as I said, originally dedicated to the Persian god Mithras, but later rededicated to Bacchus. Here's a poem that I have written about the same temple, about that same archaeological site that's now in the heart of London that was exposed by the Luftwaffe's bombs during World War II. I've called my poem Bacchus in Ruins. I have a bit of a problem with grog. I start the poem with a quote from Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verses 19 to 20. As meals are made for laughter, so wine gives joy to life, but indiscretion sprouts wings. I've known a lot of indiscretion, I'm afraid to say, maybe ashamed to say. Here's my poem, Bacchus in Ruins. The Luftwaffe exposed Bacchus beneath rubble, twice born of fire and nursed in rain, a liberated, fluid boundary lounged in disarray. The grace of Bacchus is our release into pleasure, where prayers to a fennel staff topped with a pine cone might adjust unshackled abandon and sadness. In drinking wine, we drink him, wrote Euripides in the Bacchae. But in this contest to be the one true vine, I have drowned in fundamentalism, rushing to rub myself out, to empty cask and glass in the mirror of precepts, to thine own self be true. I am soursop, weeded shit, sniffed on unwashed fingers, and I thirst to gape camel-like at hubris and catastrophe. Ah, I resent every day surrendered to moderation, the guttural groaning that celebrates order, a life denuded of ecstasy and defeat. I am fallen not to revelry, but to self-hatred, lust for transcendence, and my appeal for guilt-free suicide is the poured libation of metastasis with treatment denied. Nonetheless, I still love all those suburban honey-eaters under clear blue, spring-rich skies, but even in sunshine, my worth is shrouded, and I'm stuck self-medicating against the blue. Ah, all those suburban honey-eaters, those beautiful honey-eating birds that are such important pollinators in our suburban backyards and gardens. Ah, I love bird watching. I'm a mad twitcher. Here's another poet that I just love, another British poet, Angela Leighton. Angela Leighton is a really significant academic of poetics and of the history of poetry. I suppose she specialises in that era from the sort of Renaissance, so from that Elizabethan, Shakespearean type age, right up to, in particular, the sort of middle, late 20th century. She's written quite a bit of stuff, for example, on Sylvia Plath, Elizabeth Bishop, and then going back, as I said, to the Elizabethans. A very significant academic. Angela Leighton also is of mixed parentage. So her father was a Yorkshire man, so from the United Kingdom, and her mother was Italian, Neapolitan. So a lot of her poetry is poetry of place, but some of it is set in the UK, and much of it is also set in Italy. And she's really interested in, again, classical allusions, the retelling of classical mythology, particularly, I suppose, from the Roman world. And whereas Joe Shapcott was very interested in reimagining the voice of Rilke into English, Angela Leighton has done quite a bit with many Italian poets, and in particular Dante. She's written a lot of poems reimagining, I suppose, riffing off Dante back into English. The first poem I thought I might read to you from Angela Leighton. This wonderful book is called Something I Forget. What a fantastic title for a collection of poetry. Oh, it's magical. And I don't know whether you can see the cover, but it's got the most magical abstract artwork on the cover. I just love this book. This was quite a discovery for me. This is a poem called Tarn and Wall. I set out in sun to reach that shore, the climb's surprise among the higher fells, its wide open eye, a bowl of ice melt, brimful, sky struck, a cup for the gods, but found instead this Damascene stop, a blindness sudden as the unread rock of a sheltering wall topped with slate, each upright blade a transverse fipple to the wind's ways, each hearting stone a keeping lock to baffle the rain's crosswise slam, and a driven phasm of mist elsewhere, invisible in filling, where all I find is a coating of star moss, galaxies of green, the tiny life's clinging resilience, and a dry stone wall's soaked reserves of stony minerals. My one gain to be, crouched to the coldest thing, like a tomb, learning to see. Wow. That's a very different tone, isn't it? We're sort of moved away, I guess, from that language of evocative drama and particularly that sort of sly comic turn of voice. This is a much quieter, stiller voice, hinting at maybe what is on the other side of death. This book has been quite a surprise for me, quite a find. Oh boy, this poem. I still remember the first time I read this poem. The first time I encountered this poem, fortunately, because I'd never heard of Angela Leighton before. I was on BookTube, on YouTube, and there was an actual interview with Angela Leighton about the English Renaissance poet Andrew Marvell, sort of a contemporary of Shakespeare and Donne. And she's written this beautiful poem called By the Tide of the Humber, which is a poem in response to the life and the poetry of Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell's father apparently drowned when he was just quite a young boy. He drowned in the River Humber. So this poem is evoking this river, this sense of place, but also this sadness and about bereavement and about the beginnings of Andrew Marvell's voice as a very significant Renaissance poet. As I said, the first time I encountered this poem was on BookTube, and it was an interview with Angela Leighton where she was talking about Andrew Marvell and the place of his poetry in her own life and in her own work. And she read this poem. So the first time I encountered this poem was actually in her voice. I just feel so lucky to have had that moment. And then I raced out and bought the book, and I've been reading this poem ever since. By the Tide of Humber. Which way to walk? Eastwards by ebb tide, past the stink of the upriver staiths, and a small brick school between garden and church, to the spit of Spurn, the land's end shifter. Or westwards inland, the estuary shrinking, till you'd almost walk across sandbanks and mud, southwards to Cambridge, the way out straight, the Ermine Street for a Roman departure. Now, by the tide of Humber, once more, ponder these shallows, more lethal than deeps, and a barrow boat, grounded where a wash of water unpicks what was lost of him, bit by bit. And think no fine and private place was his, just the city's effluent waste, seeping seawards, the spirit of him held forever in the tide's endless erasures, till Spurn divides sea lippers from the still, to curb the hacking flow that pours salt into fresh daily and seems a hurt unfreshed, a trouble restored. Now I, by the tide, still whisper farewells te patre Caesar, royal head or round. My warring self by such waters crossed, fluvial, marine, knitting frets between, where contrary currents make shifting sands, channel a riptide, then swing and suck any light craft under, as if I carry his death within, unfinished, unsung. So I, by the waters of that quarrel and kill, stay for contraries no war resolves, to complain of love in verse that hides an elegy deep in the undertow of tide. Oh, it's a very different voice, isn't it, than what I was just reading in Joe Shapcott. A very still, very calm, very considered, careful voice, but so powerful. What a powerful last line that poem had as well. Angela Leighton, she's also written, as this is one of the books I have of hers, a book of poetics, as I said, going back to the Renaissance, right up to the mid-late 20th century. There's some beautiful work in this particular book on form, on Sylvia Plath and Elizabeth Bishop, which I really, really enjoy. And I'm spending a lot of time with these essays, thinking about my own confessional poetic. This book, Spills, is one of my next reads. I haven't actually read this book yet. Apparently it's a more autobiographical work, and it's a very multi-textual type work. So there's libretto there's poems, there are translations, as I said, especially from certain Italian poets like Dante. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this book when I finally go. A book called Spills. Another great title, isn't it? And here's another Angela Leighton book, 1-2. Again, I won't read from that one today. I think I'm running out of a little bit of time. Here's another English poet called Ros Barber. Ros Barber has a real, again, dramatic turn. But she also can handle really well as that dramatic turn, like Joe Shapcott. She also does that really hinting at fragility, at a very different type of thing. Here's a poem that she's written called First Thought. This is by Ros Barber. She will be white, she will be tall and white, and so unthought as to stall the sea mid-wave. Her curves like touch, as though she'd stroked your face, just by your looking, and she will command light, bend it, bow it, inspire and exhale it bright as first thought, and yours will fall away, to be replaced by nothing but clear, sheer space, like creation itself, like air, like appetite. And there, in the gap, all things are possible. Undo, erase, and see what grows instead. Unlearn your learning down to the last wrong sum, to the last lost love. Give her your skull and blast the present away. From emptiness, a breath to build upon. From silence, song. That poem has a very similar tone of voice, doesn't it, to the Angela Leighton that we were just reading. That's a beautiful book by Ros Barber called How Things Are on Thursday. Here's another book by Ros Barber, Material. Ros Barber has also done a lot of, as well as that sort of sense of place, and often quite a sort of a dramatic turn, and she loves to hint at fragility, at medical emergencies, medical problems that maybe are coming up as life goes on. She's also done quite a bit of ekphrastic poetry, poetry about painting, and this is a poem she's written called Reclining Nude, Vera. It's about an artist model. It's a wonderful, dramatic poem. Reclining nude. Some afternoons, our palates, side by side, desire made it hard to concentrate. The muse insistent, ache beguiled to bed. Allow the artist's tongue and skin and flesh to make her feel. After, he'd paint me red as the blush of love he'd drawn up through my skin. Let love quicken the ballet of his hands, flattering brush through loosened oils, begin to work with the passion I had grown in him. He stands where the window lights me best. He groans but cannot stop to kiss me, for the glow of the Paris afternoon is leaving swiftly. Red will be grey, the velvet cushions shadowed, the gold knocked from their nap like jilted wives. This man undoes me, and I am thrilled to let him. Art is an anchor, shored against forgetting, and pleasure fades as quickly as the light, so neither of us thinks about tomorrow. But here you are, and staring at my breasts, deliciously in public view, preserved like summer cherries in a Kilner jar. My name in brackets, I'm reclining nude. Mistress and model, artist once, but now I'm mostly naked flesh on canvas. Who, which woman, wouldn't want to be a muse, be loved and painted, courted and adored, and yet I spent myself as artist's fuel, not quite anonymous, an almost cruel illusion of breath and breathlessness and blood. Oh, terrific poem, isn't it? Ros Barber. Here's a Welsh Jewish poet that I also really enjoy. This is a poet called Dannie Abse. Here's a new and selected that he has recently put out called Anniversary Collection. I came across Dannie Abse because I'm writing a verse novel of my own at the moment, and my last chapter is going to be a meditation on death and bereavement. And unfortunately, Dannie Abse, his partner of many years, more than 50 years, she died recently in a car crash, and he wrote, or I haven't read it yet because I need to read it when I'm doing this last chapter of my autobiography. But he has written this apparently beautiful meditation on bereavement, on what it is like to live with bereavement, to lose a partner of 50 years so suddenly, so unexpectedly. And he's written this beautiful meditation on that. So that has led me, that discovery of Dannie Abse has led me to the poetry as well. Here's a poem that he wrote called A Marriage, obviously dedicated to his wife. This poem was written, I think, before the accident that claimed her life. Love, almost 70 licit years have passed. Racist fools said our marriage would not last. Since our student days, honeysuckle nights, when you'd open the jam-sashed windows above the dark basement flat, and I below would be an urgent, athletic Romeo. Remember when I hacked my shin and swore, and you put an exclamation mark to your lips because of the German landlady's law. No visitors after 10 p.m. She kept castrating instruments for men. Up the creaking stairs, Indian file, the door closed. You'd play before one amorous word, a Louis Armstrong record or another diverting disc, lest something of our nothings would be heard. On the stealth of my burglar's exit through the dark, the landlady's dog that we called Wagner, alert, anti-Semitic, lifting his ears to rehearse a virtuoso, chilling bark. I hear its echo still as the front garden gate down the lamplit street, faint through the hurrying years to where we are in sickness and in health, imperdurable love, aging together, lagging somewhat, slowly, running late. What a beautiful poem. You know, it has a great sense of drama, doesn't it? There is even some comic turn in it, but it is a poem that hints at fragility, at love and how fragile love can be. You know, this was written obviously before the passing of his wife, but it's a poem that knows that loss is possible, that bereavement is the next stage, I guess. It's a beautiful poem, A Marriage by Dannie Abse. Oh boy, the last poet I'm going to share with you. This book, this tiny little book, is one of my discoveries of this year. It's one of my favourite books that I have read, I think, this year. My great discoveries. The book itself, I think, was written in 2010. So it's actually not a brand new book. So unfortunately, it's taken me, yes, 2010. It's taken me a long while to discover this book. This is by an English poet called Katherine Towers, and it's called The Floating Man. It's just a beautiful collection, this. This is a collection. I have a feeling that Katherine Towers would be very influenced by that grand voice from America, Mary Oliver. There's a lot of, in this with Katherine Towers, really hinting, beautiful poems that really hint at fragility, at loss, at medical emergency. It's a book that really finds such transparent joy and abundant beauty in the everyday. It's a book that always, the poems take you by surprise. You know, they're poems like Mary Oliver that often appear to be very plainly, very simply written. Like that other great American poet too, William Stafford, at his best could do this at least. Mary Oliver does it more consistently. They're poets that really find great beauty and joy in every day, in the simplicity. And Katherine Towers, I suspect, is clearly very influenced by that voice of Mary Oliver. This is the first poem I'm going to read to you from this book, called First Word. And it's about the discovery in Ethiopia in 1974 of Lucy, that very early hominid. Bedded in gentle blankets of dust, you're dreaming pictures of water, when the young anthropologist kneels at the unstrung code of your limbs. 3'6", but no child, he thinks. You wear the constellation of your bones as lightly as millions of years in the dunes, and let him caress with the pad of his thumb the ash from under your arm, stroke your loosening thigh from its sprocket of knee. Finger and breathe the flown cage of your ribs, and what of this locket of pre-verbal jaw, which soon must vouchsafe your first word, not wheel or fire, but one you've just learned, like desire. Oh, what a great last line. This is the next poem in the collection, Ash Leaves. This, I think, is pure Mary Oliver. And as good as Mary Oliver, I think. Ash Leaves. The ash leaves fall when they're still green. They fall in vivid heaps. They clothe the ankles of the trees. And as they lie, they weep. For days they grieve and look back to the ash trees' empty arms. They miss the heights, the birds, the rain. They wish the owl would come. The ash tree shakes its brittle keys and trembles in the wind. How fine this winter life, bare bones, the workings of the mind. Just beautiful, understated simplicity, isn't it? Here's a poem called Planting Tulips. This is another thing I love about this poetry. This is a poetry that must be read slowly. I don't mind speed reading. You know, I don't mind people who claim to be very fast readers and get through many, many books in a week. I'm not that person. For me, I'm a very slow reader, and I love to really luxuriate in not only those denotative meanings of language, but all the connotative associations that come with juxtaposition, with metaphor, simile, symbolism. And this is a poet that if you read something like this quickly, you just miss it. The language can appear to be very, very understated, very plain, very direct and simple. And unless you really slow down to the poet's pace, you really miss what is going on. So this is a poem, Planting Tulips. They might have thought I was praying, knelt so long on the path, and truly my hands were glad to be down in the dead earth. Today a man was lifted from our bog. He came out dark, shining like a length of flexed rope, and opened his inside-out eyes to the sky. I would have said to leave him be, under the mosses and ling in the bog's orange juices, not to take him from his own people. I can almost forget which are my fingers and which are worms trickling between them. Perhaps I look like a beast run to ground, or someone weeping. In spring, these tulips will come up, stately. Oh, what a beautiful poem about the discovery of Iron Age bog bodies, but bringing it back to that beautiful suburban garden and the planting of tulips of great beauty coming up from that very same earth. Just a beautiful poem, isn't it? Here's a lovely poem called Starlings. I'm a twitcher, so I can't resist any poems about birds. Starlings. The dark birds, seething down the winter sky, make themselves believe they are a single soul, unravelling to a bald field. They tilt and creak on stony ground, hollow birds, as if glory never happened. Oh, boy. I think one of the reasons why I love this sort of poetry so much is it is very different to my voice. My current voice in poetry is, as I've said many times now, is a very confessional voice. And, you know, you have to be very careful with confessional poetry that you don't go over into the melodramatic, to the maudlin for the sake of just being maudlin. You know, it can be very self-indulgent if you're not careful. That is my voice, I guess. So it is one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to this sort of poetry. It's a poetry I just love. This is a poem called In the Oak Woods. I waited to hear the owl's late evening call to prayer. I lay down under old-fashioned oaks, quiet for fear the owls might startle and fly from their rooms. I waited to hear the owl's late evening call to prayer, and dreamed of moonshine and moths, the sidelong sidestepping fox who turned to ask why I stayed. I waited to hear the owl's late evening call to prayer, and lay all night in old-fashioned woods as the owl's pale faces turned to ash in their rooms. Oh, what a beautiful, quiet, considered tone, and that clever use of repetition like a chorus. It's a beautiful poem. Oh, here's the next poem by Katherine Towers. The next poem called December. This is a tricky one for me, of course, being from the southern hemisphere. For me, December speaks of the height of summer heat. Being a northern hemisphere UK poet, December is the height or the lows of winter. And this, of course, is what this poem is exploring, evoking. December. Being short of light and shadowless, we are annual ghosts, and have learned to joke that cheerfulness is mostly beyond us. We make our own sense of things, the caribou pacing the grainy dunes, the trees pale rigging, marking the place where there might be a moon. We sleep, underestimate the dark, and then we meet, speak quietly, as if close by a woman dying has woken to mouth a last word. How can we live these run-down winter blues? How can the restless, sleepless herds? Whew. I think I might finish this video because it's already become quite long. I will finish this with this poem. This is a poem Katherine Towers has written called The Way We Go. The way we go about our lives, trying out each empty room like houses we might own, eavesdropping for clues in corridors until, standing at a gate or attic window, seeing beauty in a flag of sky, we're gone, leaving the doors open, all the lights burning. Oh, just a beautiful, understated poem. But when you spend time with it, you get, don't you, that wonderful hinting at fragility, at what comes after death, about how to live a good life now. And I suppose be ready with the knowledge that we are all going to die. The way we go. The way we go about our lives, trying out each empty room, like houses we might own, eavesdropping for clues in corridors until, standing at a gate or attic window, seeing beauty in a flag of sky, we're gone, leaving the doors open, all the lights burning. Oh, Katherine Towers, one of my discoveries for 2024. This is just a wonderful book. Oh, I'm going to be searching out some more Katherine Towers and buying more of her. This is a voice like Mary Oliver I just have to read more of. Like James Wright too, I suppose, from the US. There are poets, aren't there, who can just do this, who can evoke such fragility, but gentleness, and do it with a really quiet, careful, calm voice. It's a very different voice to my own in poetry, but it's a voice that as a reader I am very, very drawn to. So thank you for tuning in. I hope it's been a wonderful hour or so with me, and you know, these are 5 poets that I am luxuriating in, but luxuriating in slowly. Slow down and let the language do its beautiful work. Ah, the bliss, the poetic wonder. Thank you, and I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.